Greetings, Internet. I am Ken from the Computer Clan, and today I am here to show you how to take your photography to the next level and make your new photos look better than ever before, better than anything else you ever shot. So the important result here is to make your photography stun people. You're going to really wow your friends. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a program called Lightroom. That's what this episode of Tidbytes is all about. It's a little introductory course to this Adobe product. And stick around until the end because I'll reveal to you something very useful that will help you out inside of Lightroom more than any tutorial video ever could. So this is Lightroom's default interface. You may get a welcome screen when you open it up for the first time. So as you see, we have some panels here, here, and here. These are all panels. We can resize them just like in many typical applications. We can even press these arrows to collapse them if we want to. So we can use the window menu or these keyboard shortcuts to switch between modules, or we can just click the little buttons up here in the toolbar, etc., etc. There's multiple ways to skin a cat. There's really no one right way or one wrong way to do a lot of the stuff I'm about to show you. There's also a nice full screen mode. The shortcut is pressing F, and you can get into full screen mode to view your photos. And if you want, a mode I like using is actually full screen. You can have the menu bar show up if you want, or you can hide it by just clicking the full screen option in this menu, and that kind of clears away more of the desktop so you can really dig in and work. So you can take some time to fiddle around with some of the interface settings and layouts and find what works for you. Another fun thing to customize is the nameplate. You can right-click on your default name up here and hit Edit Identity Plate, and you can actually change what it says up here. So it could say Computer Clan. You can change the font it's in. There we go, and we'll pick one of our brand colors there. So you can have a little fun and customize that and just make it your own. All right, now you're probably saying, Ken, all right, cool, I got it down. Just get to the photography editing and developing. Well, I will. But first, I want you to understand what raw photography is, because raw photography is basically what makes this application usable. It's all about, it's 95% about editing raw photos to make those stunning images. If you don't have an understanding of what raw photography is, feel free to check out this other Tidbytes video I did on the subject. So in a nutshell, raw photos contain a lot of extra data we can use to manipulate. So now, let's get some photos, right? So you can go to File and go to Import Photos and Videos, or you can press Shift-Command-I, or click this big Import button down here. Again, Adobe gives you multiple ways to do things. There's not a lot of right or wrong here. It's just whatever works for you. So let's click Import, and we could import off of an SD card if we put it in our computer, an external hard drive, or even just somewhere else in our computer's file system. So I have some demo files on the desktop here in my Lightroom demo folder, and here are some CR2 files. These are raw files from a Canon camera. This is the type of file extension the Canon camera uses. So up here we have a couple of options. We can copy the photo, which basically means Lightroom will leave the photos in place where they are in the computer's file system, in this case on my desktop, but it will make a copy inside of its own library folder to keep it organized. If you select Move, the photos will move into the new location and be moved away from the desktop where they are right now. And if you just hit Add, the photos will not move anywhere. They'll just show up in the catalog. The catalog is Adobe's name for the library. Everything that you see inside of the Lightroom application is managed through the catalog. It's a file that organizes everything for you. So since I already have everything in one folder, I'm just going to add them to the library and not perform a copy operation. In fact, this will perform the fastest. So I'm going to say Import, and you'll see a little progress indicator up there. And now we have our photos. We can make the thumbnails bigger or smaller. Again, we have this little film strip view down here. We can resize this and just customize the interface to whatever works for us. We have this button here that allows us to view an image in full screen. We have this button that allows us to view the grid. The shortcut for that is G. And we have loop view again, which is E. So loop view, E, grid view, G. These are handy shortcuts to know to switch between. And this is how we can browse our photos. But you probably want to do some editing. If you really want to take your photography to the next level, you should shoot raw and then learn how to develop. And again, there's many ways you can develop a photo. So let's take a photo I shot from No Brand Con in the Wisconsin Dells, and in fact, you can look at a lot of these photos that I shoot for cosplays on my cosplay photography page on Facebook. Not only is it fun, but it also shows you some great examples of final products you can get when you manipulate raw photography with a program like Lightroom. So over here we have our histogram. This tells us where our exposures lie. So right here you can see we have a lot of highlights. So the highlights are over here, the shadows are over here. So these highlights are saying, hey, we're getting some peaks here that are almost at full white. So there's a lot of white going on here. Those are the highlights. And then over here it's saying, hey, we got a lot of shadows way down near total blackness, which would be like the shorts and the bra here. We also have some metadata. And I'm assuming if you're this far in your photography journey, you understand the basics of what this stuff means, so I'm not going to harp on that stuff at the moment. But if you have questions about any of this stuff and metadata and any of that, feel free to leave a question below in the comments and I will answer it for you. Speaking of metadata, we can actually add a lot of our own metadata here as well, and I'll allow you time to experiment with that stuff. I'm not going to harp on that a lot because that's not as exciting as the visual stuff. But again, if you have questions, feel free to let me know. And there's even some quick developed shortcuts if you want to quickly change the white balance or tone controls. There's some automatic settings for that stuff as well if you're just going kind of quick. But let's get into some more of the manual stuff. So let's go into develop, and this is where the fun begins. So over on our histogram here, you can see it's now showing us when we highlight over these areas, we have blacks, shadows, exposure, highlights, and whites. And these are little peak indicators. Clipping basically means a part of the photo is perfectly white or perfectly black, which you don't really want. You don't want peaking. So click these on to get these little warning indicators. So it's like, oh man, we have some stuff in the photo that's a little too overexposed. It's too bright. It's too white. So we can fix that. That's what the clipping indicator tells us. So it highlights that in red, and it will highlight underexposure in blue, which I don't think there's much of going on here because I don't see blue. I'll simulate it though. Let's say the photo was really dark. You'll see the blue shows up. A good rule of thumb is to have a bell curve in your histogram. You don't always need to have that, but that basically means nothing's underexposed, nothing's overexposed, and stuff's pretty much balanced right in the middle. But that won't always be the case. It's just a good reference point. So let's have some fun with the photo now. First, let's correct the overexposure. Again, the red is the highlights. So what we're going to do here, we're basically just going to focus on this panel here, is we're going to bring the highlights down until that red goes away. We can go further if we want, if we kind of want to make the background a little bit darker with some of that overexposure, we can, but let's at least get the overexposed stuff out of there. Now, according to the clipping indicator, we're not underexposed, but some of this is a little too dark, and depending on what kind of monitor you're watching the YouTube video on, you may not even see all the details, but for me, I'm seeing them a lot natively on this monitor, but I'm just going to bring out some more of those details there. And notice we're already starting to shove this histogram towards the center. See how it's kind of sloshed out to the sides? But as we adjusted the shadows and those highlights, we're starting to push the histogram into the middle, approaching that bell curve I was talking about earlier. That's good. That's a good rule of thumb, again, to go towards. Over here, I can even control the overall exposure, not just the shadows and the highlights separately, but everything as a whole. I may not need to do that for this particular photo. Well, maybe a bit. I might just bump it up a bit if I want to make it a little bit brighter, kind of shove the histogram over to that side a little bit. Maybe bring that down just a tad. Bring the shadows down a bit. Highlights, maybe down a little bit more. I think that's looking okay. Now, it was a really sunny day, and I shot this in the shade. So some of it looks maybe a little too dark, a little too dull. Well, let's just have some fun with some colors, right? So saturation. We can adjust saturation here. We can also adjust individual colors of saturation here as well. So if I just want to boost the saturation of yellow, I can do that. So that fountain in the background, you see that? Quite a big difference right there. So I can adjust individual colors in terms of saturation, but I can also adjust the whole image in terms of its saturation as well, just from here. So I can bring some color into it. The color temperature, it's set to 4850, so the white balance was probably set automatically, and it detected it was in the shade, so it wasn't 5600 Kelvin for daylight, it was something a little bit lower. But I could simulate daylight by going to 5600 because that's a good rule of thumb for being out in the sun. And as you can see, we got more of that natural color back already. And maybe you want more of a warmer glow. You can even go higher, okay? So I'm gonna give it kind of more of a warm look just to give everything kind of a nice golden sunny look. So I'm gonna just add that in there, break the rules a little bit, have a little artsy fun. Again, rules are made to be broken when it comes to art. You can do that kind of stuff. Boost some saturation in there. And as you can see, we're starting to make this really pop. So if you look, if I reset this, this is what we started with. This was the raw photo right off my camera. And boom, just after a few tweaks with the raw data, we have something so much more balanced and colorful and golden and shiny. And it pops. It's so much more inviting. Another thing I like to do effect-wise is I like vignettes. Again, that's optional, but I do like vignettes a little bit to kind of make the focal point stick out a bit more. So I like to darken the edges around here a bit with a nice vignette. I can go really extreme if I wanted to, but I like it kind of subtle. And now you can see as we add in that vignette, we're hitting some blacks here. So now we can go back up and adjust those shadows to fix that if we want. So as you can see, we're kind of removing that. But there's still a little bit more. So I'll tweak the black clipping a little bit, and just a little slide of this should get rid of that dark black, because now it's going to basically say, okay, those solid blacks are now a slightly brighter black. So instead of black being black, black is now like a super, super dark gray because we adjusted what the clipping is for that black. So now nothing is underexposed. And the histogram's looking good. It's starting to curve in the middle more. We can zoom in here and see, oh, everything looks good. Oh, there's a little spot that didn't behave. We can maybe adjust the black clipping a bit or the shadows a bit, whatever we want to do to get rid of that blue. And the exposure looks more balanced now. So again, yeah, zoom in, just look for those details, look for the clipping, and correct it accordingly. So another thing you may have noticed is, what's with this green going on here? Is she radioactive? I don't know if Timo's radioactive, honestly, but we don't really want that in our photo. This is called a chromatic aberration or fringing. Sometimes fringing is purple, sometimes fringing is green. Certain optics cause this to happen. Luckily, Lightroom gives us an easy way to fix that. Let's open up the lens corrections panel. And again, let's go all manual here, right? Remember when I talked about purple fringing like 5 seconds ago? There's an option for that, but guess what? Green fringing as well. And those are the two common colors that will fringe in chromatic aberrations. So I'm going to turn the green up in terms of the amount and just expand this hue here. Just tweak that a little bit. Oh, maybe bring that back a bit. Get more of the greens inside those sliders. So as you can see now, if we step back a little bit, we used to have this green fringe here. A couple tweaks of the sliders and boom, it now blends more naturally with the rest of the background. And I think we have what is now a pretty kick-ass image of Timo. So here's another example of an image. This one's really underexposed. You can see the blue clipping points there. You can see the curve is really to the left, which again is blacks and shadows. We want to fix that. So we really need to make a drastic change with the exposure. Let's just drag the exposure slider, start pushing that curve out. Let's bring those shadows out and start forming more of that bell curve there. Let's shove that over a little bit more. The image is looking a little hot now. We're not getting overexposure because there's no part of the histogram that's hitting that pure white point, and there's no red warning points for clipping anywhere. So we're technically okay, but it's starting to look kind of bright. So I'm really starting to push it there. I'll bring the highlights down just to kind of balance that a bit and bring that exposure down a bit more. It's starting to get a lot more balanced in terms of that curve, right? That's what we want to go for. Maybe bring in some colors there, throw in a little vignette. And also, this may not be necessary for this image, but if you ever have a little bit of soft focus or some part of the image just looks too soft or too defocused, you can actually change that a little bit with the detail panel here. You can actually add sharpening into your image if you wish. And if you have too much noise in your image, this image is pretty well off in terms of noise because it was shot at an ISO of 100, which is the lowest the camera will go. So it's not that noisy, but let's say you had a lot of noise going on in your image, which you may not even be seeing on YouTube right now, but I'm talking about that grainy look that sometimes happens. You can actually reduce that with luminance noise reduction. If I cranked that up, the computer will actually soften those grains to reduce that noise. But that's not necessary for this image. I just wanted to show you that is a feature. So now you'll see we have a dramatically better photo. This is what we started with. Again, with a couple Lightroom adjustments, boom, that is now what we have. And as you can see, we have some blue clipping here, so we're a little underexposed still. I could probably bring that sharpening back down. That was just an example. I don't need it to be that high. I can bring the shadows up a bit, the black clipping up a bit, bada bing, bada boom. Pretty kick-ass photo for only, what, under a minute of work. I want to show you one more little creative process that can help you have a little more fun with a photo, and you can take those settings and apply them to multiple photos at once. So let's say I have this awesome shell cosplayer from Portal, right? So let's fix some of the exposure issues and the basic things right away. We're getting some clipping here on the Ash Pod device, so let's bring that stuff down. Bring down the highlights a bit. Now it's looking a little dark, so let's bring those shadows up. Now we're clipping again there, so let's just bring the whites down just a touch, and we'll boost the overall exposure to try to get that curve more towards the middle and balance it a bit more. Okay, so already we're getting more exposure into the photo. It's looking pretty good. Let's just take a look at some other corrections. We're maybe getting a little bit of fringing here. So again, let's go to that corrector, the lens correction here, and let's just turn up the green correction, expand our green hue in there a bit. And as you can see, we're already reducing some of that green. I noticed we're actually getting some purple fringe on the aperture logo here. So now let's actually crank up the purple a little bit, and boom, that purple is already gone. As you can see, purple there, boom, now that's gone. So we corrected the aberrations or the fringing, and we balanced out the exposures. So that was pretty simple. That's stuff you just want to check for your photos in general to make sure those fringes are gone, the overexposure is gone, the underexposure is gone, etc. Basic things like that you should look for. But now let's get creative again. Let's boost some of those colors maybe. The saturation's causing some clipping. So, again, we'll just adjust and correct as we need to. And I want to give this more of like a sciencey lab look. That green kind of fluorescent light look. So I can change the white balance on here if I wanted to, and it will change based on the preset, but I can also get really creative here just by adjusting the tint a bit. But I can also get really creative here by just adjusting some sliders. Let's say I want to put a little bit of a green tint in there, right? And maybe, do I go warm? Do I go cold? Maybe a little cold. So I can mix that blue cold, like science lab feel with a little bit of like green tintedness, a little green chemical radiation look, something sciencey looking. I don't know, science is green in my head. But see, now that looks a lot more creative, I think. We're having fun with the colors. And again, because we shot raw, we have that flexibility because the images aren't compressed. We have all that light data and all that color data that we can mess with inside of a program like Lightroom. And because I like to, let's throw a vignette on there and then just do some final clipping tweaks there. And boom, we now have something a lot more creative and fun than that. But again, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, although I like cats, so don't skin them. It's just an expression. There's so many different ways you can do things. So now let's say, okay, well, I have these other photos that need the same tweaks. Do I have to do all that stuff again? If you want to waste time, you can, but I'll show you a much quicker way. So a shortcut is select the photo that you did the initial edits on, hold down Shift, and then click the rest. There's a sync button here. Click sync. It will ask you what settings do you want to transfer from one raw photo edit to all the others. In this case, let's just check them all and say synchronize. Watch the thumbnails down here. See that? All those edits now transferred to all those other photographs. These are all edits that are just managed by Lightroom. We still have the original photos. I can right click and show in the Finder, and you'll see I still have the raw information right here. And if I want, I can even reset the photo still. But again, a simple 2-click method to transfer those settings from one photo to multiple others. So some other nice tips. There's a little tool up here, spot removal. So you can click on that, and you can actually use your scroll wheel to adjust the size. And if you hold down Shift, you can actually adjust the feathering too. And you can use the sliders over here if you want. And you can click, and it will remove little spots or blemishes for you. So that's built in, that's really handy. And if you want to go even further with your editing capabilities, besides all these tools up here, which are still very powerful, you can actually right-click and edit in, and you can add other programs to this list if you want, but you can edit directly in Photoshop. You can open up the photo as a smart object in Photoshop. You can open it up as its own composition, etc. So you can do more editing, and when you save those changes, they will pop back up in here inside of Lightroom. There's one more little tip I want to talk about before we get into that bigger thing that will help you out with Lightroom in the future. So what I like to do is use the collections over here. As you can see, Lightroom automatically organizes some things, like here's all of our photographs, here's the folder where everything is stored on our macOS solid state drive, and all that stuff is good. But if you want to get a little more personal, you can make your own collections. So click the plus button next to collections here and say create collection. I'm going to name this collection Science. And I always like to do this for ease. Hit set as target collection. You'll see why in a minute it is super useful. So I'm going to say create. And now when I'm back browsing my photos, I'm like, okay, which ones are science related? Okay, all these portal ones are. So as I'm clicking through, it could be like, okay, I'm going to drag these into my collection and just drag those in there. But there's actually a shorter, quicker way. Because it's our target collection, you see the plus sign is next to there, that means it's our target collection, we can press the shortcut B to automatically add items to our target collection. So now that I did that, you'll notice a little icon change there. See that little icon there? That means this photo is part of a collection. So again, the keyboard shortcut B is what does that. So now if we look at our science collection, only those science photos that we pressed B on will show up there. And if you need to compare photos, you can Command or Control click, if you're on Windows, multiple items and press C. And this will let you look at the selected item and the candidate. Really easy when you're just breezing through photos and need to make quick comparisons. So the shortcut for that is the letter C. And again, we can press G to get back to the grid view. So now I'm going to tell you about the big tip that could help you out inside of Lightroom more than any tutorial video ever could. As part of the Computer Clan, we offer Tidbytes training, which is one-on-one personal training over the internet. You can train with me in Adobe Lightroom, and I can be there online to answer any questions you have, and it's a lot more personal and interactive than just a video. So go ahead and check that out if you want to expand your knowledge with Lightroom or other tech products. I'm here to be your guide to help you be the best you can be. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me down below, and check out my cosplay photography page on Facebook if you haven't already, because a lot more cool photos are going to be popping up there soon. Give Lightroom a try from Adobe. There is a free trial available. If you don't already have it, maybe you'll get some kick-ass use out of it. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the not too distant future.